Alright, 7.4, solving quadratic equations. Alright, so the first equation I got is a squared minus 5a minus 36 equals 0. Alright, so this one is factorable because I can find factors of 36 that'll subtract and give me 5. That would be 9 and 4. So since I can factor it, I'm going to write everything in parentheses. A squared means I got an A and an A. 36 is negative, so that means we have unlike signs, a plus and a minus. And then remember, factors of 36 are 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. The ones that subtract to get me 5 are 4 and 9. Now, since 9 is the larger number, it's going to be negative like the 5. And that means the 4 will be positive. Alright, now we set both them equal to 0 and solve them to get the solutions. So the first solution is going to be A equals negative 4. Second solution, I would add 9 to both sides. And I get A equals 9. So my answer would be negative 4 and 9. Alright. Number 2, solve by factoring. So this one they're actually telling me to factor. So 2m squared minus 15m plus 13 is going to equal 0. So remember, since you got a number in front that you can't factor out, we got to multiply 2 times 13. 2 times 13 is 26. Now, I need to find factors of 26, which is 1 and 26, 2 and 13, and that looks like the only way to get 26. Now, let's get our parentheses set up. Since that's an m squared, I'm going to put an m and an m. Since that's positive, both of these signs will be negative like the middle number. Now, since that's positive, I want factors of 26 over here that'll add to get 15. That would be 2 and 13. And remember, we know they're both negative because we already put them negatives in there. Now, remember, since we had to multiply by 2 to get 26, we have to divide both these factors by 2 and simplify if possible. So the first one simplifies because 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that gives me m minus 1 for the first parentheses. Second parentheses, 13 will not divide by 2, so remember when you can't divide it, you move the 2 into the front and make that a 2m minus 13. All this equal to 0. Now, that's right, set both these equal to 0 and solve for those m's. So the first one, we just got to add 1 to both sides, and my first answer is going to be m equals 1. Second one has more work. We got to add 13 first. So then we get 2m equals 13, and then that's right, divide both sides by 2, because we want that to be a 1m, and that m is equal to 13 divided by 2. If you notice, up here when I had that fraction, negative 13 halves, change the sign to a positive 13 halves and you get the answer. Up here, this one reduced to a negative 1. Change that sign and you get the positive answer of 1. Alright, so you notice how I'm getting 2 answers on all these because of these a squareds and these m squareds, okay? Alright, number 3 says solve. Don't tell me how to, so I'm going to do it any way we want. So I got 5x squared equals 10. So anytime I got an x squared term and just a number, I want to get the x squared over here by itself with a 1 in front of it and all the numbers over here. So since that's 5 times x squared equals 10, I'm going to divide both sides by 5 because I want that x squared over there all by itself. So the 5's cancel. That gives me an x squared equals 10 divided by 5 is 2. Now, when you got an x squared term by itself equal to a number, you're going to come in here and take square roots of both sides. So the square root of x squared is going to be x. Now, anytime you take the square root of a number, you put the plus and minus in front, because one of your square roots can be positive and then one of the square roots can be negative. Now, square root of 2, we cannot simplify that radical any further, so the final answer will be x equals plus or minus square root of 2. Okay, so that's like getting one answer as the square root of 2, and then the second answer will be a negative square root of 2. So we use that plus and minus for shorthand when we do radicals, okay? Alright, number 4 here. Get everything situated. Alright, number 4 wants me to solve. I got 4x squared plus 28 equals 0. Alright, so let's see. Since that's an x squared term in a number, I'm going to get the number on the other side by subtracting 28. That's going to give me my 4x squared is going to equal that negative 28. Now, remember, like I did a while ago, I'm going to divide both sides by 4 because I want that to be a 1x squared sitting there. Alright, so 4 divided by 4 gives me an x squared equal to negative 28 divided by 4 is a negative 7. Alright, now I got the x squared term equal to a number. That's right, we're going to take square roots of both sides. Alright, so the square root of x squared is x equals, remember this is going to be a plus or minus for this answer since we're taking the square root of a radical. Now, I can't take the square root of negative 7, so remember, I would break that radical into a negative 1 and a 7. So there's no other factors in 7 that are perfect squares, so I can't break the 7 down, but I do have to break out that negative 1. Because remember, what's the square root of negative 1 equal? It equals I. And then you would bring down your square root of 7. So remember, you got to bring that negative out as an I. And then since you couldn't do nothing to the square root of 7, bring it down. So one answer is x equals a I square root of 7. Second answer is x equals negative I square root of 7. Alright, let's see number 5. X squared plus 100 equals 0. And that just says solve. So once again, I got an x squared term and a number. So I'm going to subtract a number and get it to the other side. So notice what that does. That brings down my x squared. And that's going to equal a negative 100. So if something's positive on one side, when you move it over, you just change its sign. Now, since the x squared is by itself, I'm going to take my square roots. So notice what happens. Square root of x squared is x. That's going to equal a plus or minus. So y'all, what's the square root of a negative 100? I would break that radical into a square root of a 100 and a square root of negative 1. The reason I'm putting the square root of 100 first this time, because the square root of 100 comes out as a 10, and then the square root of negative 1 comes out as a I. So that the answer here is plus or minus 10I. So x equals 10I, and x equals a negative 10I. Alright, y'all, that brings us down to number 6. 6 wants me to solve. I got 3v squared equals 24v. Alrighty, so on this example, I cannot take square roots of both sides because I got a variable on the number side this time. So since there's a variable right here, I need to move the variable all on one side by subtracting 24v. Alright, so 3v squared minus 24v is going to equal 0. Now, I didn't add them or subtract them because they're not like terms, and v's cannot actually combine with v squares. So you have to leave them uncombined. Now, since you got a variable in both of these terms, what we're going to do is solve this by factoring, and what we want to do is factor out a GCF between both of these. So both of these have a 3 in them, so we're going to factor out a 3, and then v squared and a v both have at least a v in them. So let's see what we're going to put in here. 3v squared divided by 3v leaves you 1v minus 24v divided by 3v makes that a 8. All this is equal to 0. Now, since it's factored, we said each of these factors equal to 0. So 3v is going to equal 0, and v minus 8 is going to equal 0. Alright, so to solve the first one, I'm going to divide by 3. But y'all, 0 divided by 3 is still going to be 0. And then on the second one, I would add 8 to both sides. And I get v equals positive 8. Alright, so my answers would be 0 and 8. Alright, let's see, number 7. Oh, y'all, 7's a graph, so I'm going to try to bring that up here. So I got my graph right here. So they want to know what are the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts is what these numbers are where it's crossing the x-axis. So the x-intercepts would have to be written in the form of ordered pairs. So my x-intercepts, I'm going to have 2 of them because it crosses the x-axis twice. So remember, these are in the form of the x first and then the 0, since the y value on the x-axis is 0. So let's see, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like it goes out -7. So the first point would be -7, 0. So you got to write them like an ordered pair, comma, and then the second ordered pair looks like it's going to the right about 7. So that would be 7, 0. And then notice on MATLAB you got to put a comma in between your 2 ordered pairs. So then it says, what are the zeros? Well, the zeros are the x values where it crosses the x-axis at. So we said this one over here crossed at -7. So the first 0 is going to be -7. And then comma, the other 0 would be 7 because that's where it crosses the x-axis at. But do you notice the zeros are the same as the x-intercepts? Alright, y'all, 8 was the same way. They want me to find the x-intercepts. So let's see, that looks like -1, -2. So that x-intercept is going to be -2, 0. And then comma. This one over here looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was going to be at 4, 0. And just remember on MATLAB, put that comma in between them points. Now the zeros of the function, same thing. That's going to be the x values where it crosses the x-axis. So it crosses over here at -2. So that's the first 0. And then the other 0 over here we said was 4. And there you go. So once again, the zeros are the same as the x-intercepts. Alright, y'all. So now I got room for this. We'll make this number 9 now. So number 9 wants me to solve by the quadratic formula. So x squared minus 6x equals 40. So if I want to solve this by the quad, first thing I need to do is get a 0 where the 40 is. So we're going to subtract 40 from both sides. So I get my x squared minus 6x minus 40 all equal to 0. So none of these were like terms, and I have them in descending order. I got the x squared, the x, and then the number. So to use quad, I need to figure out what a, b, and c are going to equal. A is the number in front of the x squared. Since there's no number there, that's a 1. B is the second number, which is -6. And C is the third number, which is -40. Alright, so the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Alright, so I plug in for my letters. So I'm going to get x equals -b, which is a -6. So a double negative will make that a positive. Plus or minus square root b squared, that'll be -6 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, and c is -40. All that's over 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. Now, we said that double negative made that a positive 6, plus or minus, square root. Anytime you square a number, it's going to be positive. So negative 6 squared is a positive 36. And then, y'all, this side is minus 4 times a times c. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 40 is a positive 160. All that's over 2 times 1, which is 2. Alright, so let's see what happens. 6 plus or minus square root 36 plus 160 is 196. All that's over 2. Alright, so let's see what's going to happen. That's going to give me 6 plus or minus square root of 196 is 14. All that's divided by 2. Now, if you want to simplify this a little bit more, since all three of these divide by 2, you'll get 6 divided by 2 is 3, plus or minus 14 divided by 2 is 7. So to get my first answer, I do 3 plus 7, and 3 plus 7 is 10. So the first time I went through and I added. To get my second answer, I do 3 minus 7. And 3 minus 7 is a negative 4. So the solutions are x equals 10 and x equals negative 4. Alright, y'all, I think I got time to do this last one real quick. X squared minus x plus 12 equals 0. So I can't factor because there's not factors of 12 that'll give me a 1. So a would be 1, b would be negative 1, c would be 12. And I'm going to show you how to set this up. So x equals negative b, which is a negative 1, plus or minus square root b squared, which is negative 1 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, and c is 12. All that over 2 times a, which is 1. Alright, so negative makes that a positive 1, plus or minus square root. Negative 1 squared is 1. Minus 4 times 1 is negative 4. Times that 12 is a negative 48. All over 2. Alright, so watch what happens. I get 1 plus or minus square root. 1 minus 48 is a negative 47. All over 2. Alright, so that's going to give me 1 plus or minus. Cannot do nothing to the 47 because it has no perfect square factors, but I can break out that negative 1 and make that an I. So that'll give me 1 plus or minus square root of 47 I all over 2. And then what they want me to do is write this in a plus bi form, which means they want me to split it apart. So you put the 1 over the 2, so you get 1/2 plus or minus square root of 47 over 2, and then you write the I. Make sure you don't put the I under the radical or it will count that wrong. You got to bring it to the outside. Alright, so this gives me my real number, which is A, plus or minus my imaginary number, which is the BI. Alright, y'all, good luck, and I'll see y'all later.